Okie dokie.
Alright, to start, Mario Kart Stadium has a lot of grass cuts, such as the one at the start of the track where you can cut behind these pipes with a simple mushroom. And then again you can go in between the wall and this pipe with another mushroom in this corner. Now for the third grass cut, you can just cut through the grass and go on the ramp. And for the fourth one, you can just cut right through here with another mushroom. Now, after the glider section, instead of staying on the glider, if you go right down, you can use a mushroom to cut through the pit of sand. However, if you want to save a bit of extra time, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut behind this pipe to save barely a few milliseconds. However, you don't actually need a mushroom for all of these, because with this one, you can just hop right through it with a super mini turbo. And then on this next shortcut, you can just get a regular mini turbo and just hop through the off-road to the ramp. And then for this shortcut, you can just hop right through the off-road as the gravity is kind of weird there for some reason. And for this section, if you hold an Ultra Mini Turbo here, you can release it right before the glider, so instead of taking a mushroom through the shortcut, you can just glide over it. However, in this clip I used a mushroom, so I didn't end up landing in the off-road. Next track is Water Park, and no joke, this track has only a single shortcut, being this one through the off-road. Guess if you want to count it, instead of tricking off of this ramp, you should instead drift off of it and let the Mini Turbo take you across this one straightaway. Next up is Sweet Sweet Canyon. This track actually has a decent amount of shortcuts, such as this one cut through the off-road at the start of the track. Now on both paths, there is a chocolate bit of off-road that you can actually cut through with a mushroom on both sides. However, the blue path is faster because of this one shortcut. Now, after the split path section, there is the iconic donut shortcut that can be crossed with a mushroom. Next is a pretty useless shortcut. With a mushroom, you can just cut right through this bit of off-road, however, this is very pointless. The final track for the mushroom cut is Swamp Ruins, with the first shortcut being a grass cut to a ramp similar to the one in Mario Kart Stadium. Now this isn't really a shortcut, but it is the fastest way to go in the middle, in the water, in the split path section and come out through the ramp. And then right before the glider section, we have this little ramp off to the side of the track. For the ramp shortcut at the beginning, you don't actually need a mushroom to do this, however in this clip I did it pretty rough. I'm pretty sure you can do it better. Now if you want to save just barely any time, you can use a mushroom and hop over this part of the track. And on the final lap, there is this ramp that opens up that you can use to glide across the middle of the split path section. Now for the first track of the Flower Cup, Mario Circuit, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through this one grass cut. And the same thing can be done on the second turn right here, where you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through this entire bit of sand. Both of these can be done with only a single mushroom by hopping out of the off-road right before the mushroom ends. The next track is Toad Harbor, and the first shortcut is right at the beginning of the track where you can just build up a super mini turbo and hop right through this bit of grass. However though, do not waste your mushroom on this shortcut. Trust me, it is not worth it. Our next shortcut is at the very end of the track where you can use a mushroom to cut through this grass. This isn't really a shortcut, but it is faster. At the beginning of the track, you can use a mushroom to cut through all of the boxes and barrels. This isn't really a shortcut, but it is faster than just taking the normal route. If you drift the opposite way of the turn here, and get a mini turbo, you can super bounce off of the trolley. However, this is very difficult and inconsistent, so I wouldn't recommend it online. The next track is Twisted Mansion, and the first shortcut is a mushroom through these bookshelves. And the second and last shortcut in Twisted Mansion is you can cut through all of this grass with 2 mushrooms. And finally, for the Flower Cup is Shy Guy Falls, where you can do a small grass cut with a mushroom. Now for this next one, if you can take the top path, this gives you the easiest lines to use a mushroom to take this shortcut, and then you can go off this ramp to use another mushroom for this grass cut. However, if you only have one mushroom, you can just take this one ramp and that's it. This is faster than just taking the grass cut. However, as a side note, it's actually a bad idea to trick off of this ramp on 150 or 200cc, as the trick boost will just give you too much speed to be able to turn around quick enough. The first shortcut for Sunshine Airport involves you going off of this boost ramp and using a mushroom through this grass. This is the fastest way to take this grass cut. Now for the next shortcut, if you use a mushroom through this grass cut, you have the perfect lines to go off of this ramp. Now before you mention, this shortcut right here is actually slower than the regular path. So just don't take it, because you can also get coins from taking the regular path. Now for Dolphin Shoals, again, not really a shortcut, but it is faster to go off the side of the ramp instead of directly in front of it. Now when going through the split path section, the fastest way is to go on the right side with this boost panel and the pipe pushing you down. Now when you're going on the eel, the best way to do this is to shake your controller as fast as you can to get as many tricks as possible. And finally, after the glider section, whenever you land on the ground, there's a small piece of off-road that you can use a mushroom to go through. However, don't try gliding over it, cause this just won't work in 150cc. Now for Electrodome, after the glider section, at the beginning of the track, there is a bit of off-road that you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through. And finally, after the glider section right at the end of the track, there is a bit of off-road here that you can use 1 mushroom and a hop out at the end. Finally, for the Star Cup is Mount Wario, and the first shortcut is by building a Super Mini Turbo and jumping over this gap. Now the fastest way to go through this tunnel section is by using the glider, tricking on this ramp boost, going on this rock, tricking off of it, and landing on the boost panel. Going down the ramp to come here, you can use the mushroom into this middle pass to go on the glider. Then at the very end of the track, you can use a mushroom to cut through this bit of off-road right to the finish line. Next for Cloud Top Cruise, you can get a mini turbo on this bounce pad to get a super bounce to get onto the other side. And then right after, I know everyone takes this, but you should take that bounce pad. And finally, at the end of the track, there are these 2 drip leaves right here that you can trick right across them. I find it easier to drift into them instead of going straight. And for Bone Dry Dunes, right at the start of the track, there is a bit of off-road right here that you can use a mushroom to cut through. Then if you keep going throughout the track, there's also this ramp in the middle of this split path that you can mushroom to. Once you get to the second split path, you want to go on the inside and then go on the outside of this split path and then go on the wooded part of the split path. Now at the very end of the track, you can drift into the off-road and get in between these bones that are sticking outside of the off-road. Now at the end of the wooden path, if you go down right to this part that sprouts up, you can go on the top path which reveals a wooden plank. And then you can trick down to the bottom and continue on with your race. Now on Bowser's Castle, at the end of the split path, you can actually jump that little corner there. Then, after the glider, there's a cut here in the off-road that you can do with a mushroom. And finally, for the Special Cup is Rainbow Road. Whenever you get past this M section on the road, you can actually use a mushroom to go through this off-road. And if you don't have a mushroom, you can just drift along this part of the road. If you take the right path after the cannon glider, you can jump off this part of the track to end up on another part of the track, which is a lot faster than just taking the track normally. Instead, if you choose to go on the left path, don't worry, this shortcut is still possible. The only difference is you can just jump off this part of the track onto the right side and then do the exact same thing again. However, if you don't choose to do that, there is some off-road here you can cut through with a mushroom. And on the left path, there is also a bit of off-road you can cut off with a mushroom. Next for Moo Moo Meadows, there isn't many shortcuts for what this track is, but first there's a grass cut right there, and then there's another grass cut right here. Though the second one is faster if you have only a single mushroom. And if you choose to take the glider, you can drift off of it for the mini turbo to glide you across, and then go on the boost panel and use a mushroom in the grass patch. Next off with GBA Mario Circuit, this track has a solid amount of shortcuts, such as this one right at the start of the track, and then the second grass cut right before the boost ramp. Now here is where you have a bit of options. The first option is you can take this glider and glide over the wall and drift onto the other side. And your second option is right here, where you can use 3 mushrooms that cut through all of this grass. If you don't want to use all 3 mushrooms, you can just use a single mushroom to go through these tires. And if you don't even have a mushroom, you can just build up a super mini turbo and hop right over these tires. Next with Cheep Cheep Beach, this track has 2 very small shortcuts, being this one underwater, going through some off-road with a mushroom. Now if you go down this part of the track, there is some mud here you can cut off with a mushroom. The final track of the Shell Cup, Toad's Turnpike, actually does not have a single shortcut throughout the whole track, making it one of the only tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe that doesn't have a shortcut. Next up is Dry Dry Ruins, and let me tell you, this track has some of the biggest shortcuts in the game, such as this one that requires all 3 mushrooms just to get across. And we have a fairly basic one right here, where you can just hop across this sand to the ramp without a mushroom. And again right here, if you have 2 mushrooms, you can cut across all of this off-road. Now after the ramp, you can use 2 more mushrooms to cut through all of this off-road. No joke, there's actually a such thing of golden mushroom shortcuts, which is the main term for Mario Kart World, but Mario Kart 8 Deluxe still has some. Like this one right here that can only be cut with a golden mushroom. And then now we have this one right here, similar to the last one, but you can cut all the way behind the finish line, and cut this one turn right here. You need 2 golden mushrooms just to do this one. Now it's for Donut Plains 3. This one, there is a mushroom shortcut right at the start of the track. And then right after it, there's another mushroom cut right here, and if you want, you can skip this one turn by taking the most inside lines possible. And finally, we have this one grass cut right here. Next track is Royal Raceway, and this track has a really good amount of shortcuts, and you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through this one at the beginning. If you only have 1 mushroom, you can always just take the second part of the shortcut. And now we have the boost ramp shortcut that can just be taken with a mushroom. This shortcut can vary whether or not you have good items already, but you can cut through this grass here, but it does skip an item box. And now, if you keep going to the very final turn, there is this bit of grass you can cut through. However, right before the final turn, if you have a mushroom, there is some grass you can cut behind this tree. It's small, but you can cut off this grass. Now we have DK Jungle. Again, this isn't really a shortcut, but it is a lot faster. You can get a mini turbo and bounce off of this flower for a super bounce. After the bridge, there is this bit of grass you can cut with a mushroom. At the end, if you have anything above 7 coins, it's best if you take the inside path. And if you're low on coins, you want to take the outside path so you can collect those 3 coins there. Now for Wario Stadium, this track only has a single shortcut, being this one across the mud. Now at the beginning of Sherbet Land, there is a bit of snow here you can cut off. Now after the tunnel section, you can use a mushroom through the snow. And basically at the end of the track, you can use a mushroom to this hidden glider panel. Next for Music Park, right at the start of the track, there is a bit of grass you can cut. By the way, do not take that ramp, because it's pointless. It just throws you off. And after the bouncing music notes section, you can take a really tight angle and super bounce off of the tambourine. But if you don't want to take that, you can always just use a mushroom to cut through this grass. Now for Yoshi Valley, after the bridge, there's a ramp right here. However, this ramp is actually worthless. And the reason why this ramp is worthless is because right next to it there's an even better shortcut through the grass right here. And when going through the split paths, this is the fastest route. Now for Tick-Tock Clock, the section with the red and blue gears, the fastest way is avoiding the glider and trying to trick off of all of the gear edges. Now with these two gears, watch closely. You want to stop accelerating, trick, accelerate again, and trick again. Now usually on the final lap there's this hand that extends onto the track that you can use to cut this whole corner. Now the only shortcut on Piranha Plant Slide is this grass cut through this wooden bush in between the fences. Now for Grumble Volcano, at the very start of the track there's a mushroom cut right here and some off-road. And then if you keep going out throughout the track, there's another small bit of off-road that you can just hop right through. And then after the tunnel there's some off-road you can cut through right here. And if you don't want to take that, there's one right after here, however it is a little risky on lap 2 and 3. And finally, only on lap 3, there is a ramp here that gets exposed after the stage crumples that you can take right to the finish line. Just like Toad's Turnpike, N64 Rainbow Road does not have a single shortcut upon it. Now for the very first track of the Mario Kart 8 Wii U DLC wave, Yoshi's Circuit, there is a grass cut you can do right here with a mushroom. And right after Yoshi's Nose, there is a grass cut here you can do without a mushroom, and then next we can use a mushroom to cut through this grass. And at the end of the track, there is a grass cut right here with a mushroom that you can do. And Excite Bike Arena has two very identical shortcuts at each side of the track. Now for Dragon Driftway, you can use a mushroom to go off of this ramp. However, if you save your mushroom, you can drift and cut this entire turn. Just make sure to stop accelerating after. However, if you don't want to do it or you don't know how to, you can always cut off that bit of grass, which still saves a solid amount of time. And finally, at the ending turn, you can use a single mushroom to cut off all of this grass. Mute City only has shortcuts at the very end of the track, like that one cut on the off-road there, and then right after there's some off-road you can cut here into two ramps. Make sure to hold down on your joystick so you can cut off all of this bit of off-road. If you choose not to take that, there is off-road right here you can cut. If not that either, there is more off-road here. Sadly, Wario's Gold Mine only has a single shortcut. I know. Nowhere near as exciting as the original. The only shortcut SNES Rainbow Road has to offer is this ramp right here. The fastest way through the split path section on Ice Ice Outpost is to start off on yellow, switch to the green path, and end off on the green path. Then right after, there is a double ramp shortcut, which gives you the perfect lines to take this next double ramp shortcut. And there's another double ramp shortcut right at the end of the track. Now for Hyrule Circuit, there's a ramp off in the off-road, and then there's a turn here you can cut with a mushroom. Now on the spiral inside of the castle, if you're precise enough to hit all three spin boosters, or if you get lucky, you can take the ramp and spin around the Master Sword. And then right after, you can use a mushroom to cut through this grass. And one of the last turns, you are able to hop through the grass. Just be careful of the Piranha Plant on lap 3. For it being the smallest track in the game, Baby Park has two very small shortcuts at each side, similar to Excite Bike Arena. Cheese Land is shortcut heaven, such as that one right there through the off-road. And if you have two mushrooms, you can use one to get to the glider panel, and then if you have another mushroom, hop through the sand a little bit to get to the second glider. And if you choose not to take that, there is sand right there you can cut through. And then at the very beginning, there is some sand you can cut through right there. And you can also use a mushroom to cut right behind the chain chomp. And finally, there is sand you can cut through with a mushroom. Now for Wild Woods, if you take the left path, there is some grass you can cut through right here. And at the end of the track, there is a ramp that you can go on with a mushroom. Now for Animal Crossing, there are 2 grass cuts at the very beginning of the track which involve a mushroom. And at the very end, there's another grass cut. Now for Neo Bowser City, there is some off-road right there you can cut. Now at the end of the track, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through all of that off-road. Now, after the glider, when going in between laps 2 or 3 or 1 and 2, you can use that little gushing thing that will boost you up in the gliders. Starting off on the red section of Ribbon Road, there's some off-road here you can cut through with a mushroom. And on the green section, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through these different places of off-road. Now for the blue path, there is a boost ramp here that is off on the side of the track, and then right after it, there is a glider panel that is right off of the track. And back on the red path, there's this bit of off-road you can cut through. Now with Super Bell Subway, there are actually 3 back-to-back shortcuts, starting off with this one right here where you can hop out at the end of the mushroom, second one here where you can go on to the boost ramp right here, and then a little bit after, at the final turn of the track, there's some grass here you can cut through with a mushroom. And the final track is Big Blue. Again, there are 3 back-to-back shortcuts just like Super Bell Subway. However, on your second and third shortcuts, you don't actually need a mushroom for these, though I messed up in this clip. Now at the start of lap 2, if you hold your drift, and you can use your Ultra Mini Turbo to jump off onto this section of the track. It isn't possible to do the long gap in 150cc though. Similar to Rainbow Road, if you drive on the purple path, you can jump onto the green path, and then you can go on the green path back to the purple path, which is the fastest way through here. Then you can use 3 mushrooms through these shortcuts.